Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Pierce, and I'm the director of the Transnational Literature Series at Brookline Booksmith, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and your host for tonight's conversation. The Transnational Series focuses on stories of migration, the intersection of politics and literature, and works in translation. The series was launched in early 2018, and while we miss having in-person events at the store, we love having this opportunity to connect with you all virtually. I just want to offer a quick Zoom webinar tutorial. Zoom's live auto transcript function has been enabled for this event. If you would like to view the captions, you can find the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window. At the bottom of the screen, you'll also see a few other icons. One of those is a Q&A icon where you can enter in your questions at any time during the conversation. Another button will get you to the chat window. That space is there for you all. Please feel free to chat during the event. My colleague Ashley will be in the chat as well, dropping in useful information, including links to books by our authors. We do make every effort to keep these events free to attend in the hopes that you will purchase the featured books from us. So thank you in advance for taking a look and supporting independent bookstores. And finally, you can see us, but we can't see you. So relax and please enjoy the conversation. Tonight, I have the great honor of introducing Mariana Oliver and Julia Sanches. Mariana is currently working toward a doctoral degree in modern literature at the Ibero-American University in Mexico City. She was granted a fellowship for essay writing at the Foundation for Mexican Literature and was awarded the Jose Vasconcelos National Young Essay Award for Migratory Birds. Julia Sanches is a translator of Portuguese, Spanish, and Catalan. She has translated works by Susana Moreira Marquez, Claudia Hernandez, Daniel Galera, and Eva Baltazar, among others. Her shorter translations have appeared in various magazines and periodicals, including Words Without Borders, Granta, Tin House, and Guernica. A founding member of Sedalia & Co., Julia sits in the Council of the Authors Guild. And tonight's moderator, Jazmina Barrera, has a master's degree in creative writing in Spanish from NYU, which she completed with the support of a Fulbright grant. Her book of essays, Cuerpo Extraño, was awarded the Latin American Voices Prize in 2013. She has published her work in various print and digital media outlets, such as Nexos, Este País, Dossier, Vice, Letras Libres, and Tierra Adentro, among others. A grantee of the Young Creators Program at FONCA, she is editor and co-founder of Ediciones Antilope. She is the author most recently of On Lighthouses, translated by Christina McSweeney, a staff favorite here at Brookline Booksmith. I'm so thrilled to have them here together in conversation. And now, Mariana, Julia, and Jazmina.
Hi, Pierce. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here presenting this beautiful book. I have a screen here. Yeah. So this is a book that I personally cherish because I was there when it was being created. I was in a workshop with Mariana. So I listened to many of these essays, to previous versions of them. And I feel like I was a witness to the growth of this book into this wonderful, subtle, beautiful collection of essays that it is today. Also, when I read them, I can hear Mariana's voice and her personality, her sweetness and her wisdom, which are always so soothing to me. I also have to mention at the beginning the lovely edition that Transit Books did, and the wonderful, really amazing translation by Julia Sanches. I'm so happy to be here with both of you today. And I can start with the questions if you're okay with it. Yes, okay. Let's go right into it. So my first question is like the mandatory one for Mariana. And it is, what is the story of this book? How did it come to be?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much to all of you for being here. I would like to thank also the organizers and my publisher house, Transit, y desde luego a Julia y a Jazmina. Gracias por conversar conmigo hoy. Well, I wrote this book between 2013 and 2015, thanks to a fellowship that I received from La Fundación para las Letras Mexicanas. In the first moment, I applied for an academic research fellowship. But after the interview, they suggested me to change to the creative writing fellowship. Actually, at that time, I didn't have any experience with creative writing. But fortunately, I noticed that all the tools that I used with my academic research were also useful for that. For example, archival research or finding out the roots, the words, or looking photographs or looking maps, all that helped me to write this book. So I had no specific plan or a project, a writing project. But at that moment, I had just come back from Germany to Mexico. So every question about being a foreigner was close to me in that moment. I was questioning myself the meaning of home or the meaning of a house, and also the experience to be an outsider and just not just outside my city or my land, but also my language. So I finished with these essays, and I noticed that they felt like a different moment of a journey. So I decided to start with the story of these birds that learn to fly, and then have a travel and finished with the home and the questions around home.
Yes, and I feel like Migratory Birds is the perfect title for this book, because each essay feels like one of these passing birds that takes you to a different destiny on a quick travel to an unknown land for a brief period of time. So if you could tell us a bit more about travels, which is such an important topic in your book. And it is also why I feel it is such a joy to read right now. I feel like many of us miss traveling, and you can travel with this book. So this is a question for both of you. Like, what is the importance of travels and traveling in your writing, Mariana, and in your translations, Julia?
Julia, do you want to start this time?
Okay. I was just actually in our, I guess, the green room of this Zoom talk. I was explaining to Jazmina how travel has been a pretty key part of my life. I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't left Brazil as a 3-month-old and then lived in the United States and Mexico and several other places, including several countries in Europe. And I actually have quite a difficult relationship with travel, in part because of that. My life is full of trying to maintain my family ties and my friendships alive. So when I travel, it's to one of my various homes. So I'll travel to the home I made in Edinburgh, and I'll travel to the home I made in Spain, and I'll travel to the home I made in Brazil. I made like the more official home, which is Brazil, because that, I have the passport and the whole family network is there. But that means I don't know how to travel as a tourist very well. Because as a young girl, I experienced living immersed in a place. I never knew how to be any other way in a place. I'm less interested in exploring somewhere for 2 weeks and much more interested in just making it my home for 2 years, even though that's not always very possible. And something you were saying about the inception of this book, Mariana, sort of resonated. The sort of questioning of language, the questioning of home, the questioning of otherness is something that I really responded to in Migratory Birds, I think in a subconscious way at the beginning. But yeah, so I suppose that's where I'll stop with travel.
Well, many of these essays came about from actual trips. I think that travel is an opportunity to question yourself what you think is normal. Yeah, for example, the time you eat or what you take for breakfast, if you need to use shoes, or what can you say, or if you have to cover your head. So for me, being out of Mexico was like asking me everything I knew, even about language, even about what can I see or what can I know through a language. You have to pay attention to many other languages, like the body or like the expressions. You learn to see these kind of things when you don't understand nothing. And I think that understand nothing is an experience that everybody should know, to go beyond language. Yeah, and I think that travel is this kind of opportunity.
That's such a beautiful thing. I really want to travel to a place where I don't understand anything right now. I think I've never really done it. So my next question is, I feel like if this book were a bird, it will be one that continuously returns to Germany. And some of the most beautiful reflections in the book have to do with the German language and its culture. And you touch upon it a little bit in the book, Mariana, in these like glimpses of your life. But could you tell us more about how did you come to the German language, and why did you decide to learn German, and how did that started?
Okay. The short answer is to say that because I thought that German was complicated, but well, I came to German because I studied German literature at university. So I started to learn German when I was 18 years old, a little bit old for German, maybe. But for me, learning German has two the important parts. First of all, was that when I learned German, I think that I learned Spanish. Was the first time that I think I was thinking about my own language. And also for me, German was a revelation. Yeah, like the possibility to join or to construct the world, the whole world in a different way with language. Yeah, to join every word as possible. So I was like very wonder with that language at that moment. Of course, I suffer a little bit, but it was wonderful at that time.
So it was first the literature and then the language for you? Yeah.
Well, maybe. Of course, I've read some of these books, German authors, first in Spanish, but I think I remember well the first time I read something in German and I noticed that I understood what was on paper. And when I also recognize the sounds and start to produce sounds that are not in Spanish, just in German.
Great. And what about you, Julia? I know that you've lived in many places and speak so many languages and translate from many languages as well. So what does German mean to you, and what was how was it like to translate this book that has so much to do with Germany?
It was, also a revelation. I have never studied German, even though I lived in Switzerland. I lived in the French-speaking part. And for some reason, I can count to 20, but I don't know at what point in my life I was taught to do that. It's just, I absorbed the knowledge at some point. But I've always been drawn to German, and my hope is that eventually Mariana will teach me German, because I know she teaches German as a sort of side gig apart from doing a PhD. And what I like about it is what she goes into in the essay whose title I cannot pronounce. Trümmerfrauen?
Trümmerfrauen, yeah.
There you go. The sort of the way my very basic understanding of German is what attracts me is how it functions in building blocks. You can take two concepts, shove them together, and have something else. And you get glimpses of that in English. And I find that my interest in language learning has to do with trying to find traces of the languages I speak in other languages. So I'd love to learn Arabic to see the way Arabic has influenced Spanish and Portuguese and French. And I'd love to see German for how it's worked on on English. But when it comes to sort of the nitty gritty of translating this book, I had to ask friends for help. So I would take Mariana's translations into Spanish of certain texts and try to reverse translate them into English, and then ask friends if they could figure out the source and then help me translate it into more consistent English that wasn't sort of the third destination of the sentence. So I did seek help from a couple of people in that respect. But I've been to Berlin maybe twice in my life, so it was all very new and novel. I'm also very, not to take this too off track, but for years I've been very interested in writers from other countries, from outside the English language, writing about places that aren't their own homes, because often in the Anglophone publishing market, we try to sort of pigeonhole: Mexican writer writes about Mexico, Brazilian writer writes about Brazil, Spanish writer must write about Spain, etc. And one of the things I loved about Mariana's book is that she doesn't do that, and it's a beautiful collection of essays that stands on its own without it having to be sort of almost anthropological. I like this sort of gaze outside. Even though she's exploring issues of home, it's still about places other than home too.
Yes. So as you are saying, I think migration is also one of the very key topics in the book, from the birds to displaced populations to self-exiled characters. So my question is, what does it mean for the both of you, the possibility of translation, of books traveling across languages and countries? Maybe this is too vast a question, but anything you'd like to say about it?
Okay, well, I think that the translation of the book opens up the possibility to reach other people, yeah, to reach other readers with other cultures that could be also identified with this experience of being a foreigner, not just in Germany, but in other many countries. Also, we are used to think or to suppose that monolingualism is the rule, but that's not right. I mean, that's not the case. The majority of the population of the world is actually speak 2 or 3 or many other languages. So they are used to think and to love and to write and to live in this multilingual universe.
I'm not the first person to think of this, and I think a lot of translators come to the same idea in different moments without necessarily reading each other. But to me, carrying literature into other languages is a way of sort of not fulfilling its potential, but sort of adding to the potential of a text. If a text is only, it's reading, every reader in the world reading it, I feel like it's not fulfilling, it's not reaching its full potential if it's not being interpreted into other languages that sort of expand the possibility of what that sentence is. Even, this is probably problematic, but I almost like the idea of errors, or not errors, but misinterpretations being added to it. I'm not condoning this. I don't want to be, tied to a stake and burned or anything, but the idea that an error is such a visible reading, misreading or reading, I like the idea. I like that for translation, if only because it exposes what it actually is, which is a rereading of a text and a rewriting of a text made by human beings. And every time, I think I'm just repeating myself now, but every time the text moves into another language, it adds another interpretation. So as I was discussing with your cousin, Paula Abramo, Jazmina, we're very in favor of multiple translations of a single text existing in the same language, because it only adds to what that text can actually become. Don't know if that answers your question though.
Definitely, that was great. And this leads me to my next question for the both of you, which is, how was it working together in this book? How did you do it? Yes, what can you tell us about that relationship?
Oh, okay, you want to start, Julia?
Yeah. I can start. Okay, beautiful. It's been a great experience. I am possibly the annoying translator who sends her author 10,000 questions because I just want to confirm my understanding, especially if the translator is the writer is living. I don't see, and amenable the way Mariana is amenable, it feels right to take that extra step. And so by now, we've been working together on this for officially for almost a year, but unofficially, I started translating this book a few years ago. And as is the case with many of my Latin American authors, a lot of our correspondence is over WhatsApp. And it's either I text a question and I get a voice message with a possible response. But it was very collaborative in the sense that if there was something that I needed to change because the repetition wasn't working in English, I would tell Mariana about it, and then she would ask me to read it to her so that she could see how the rhythm sounded in English, which was very fortuitous because I translate by rhythm so much. I'm constantly trying to refine sentences so that the rhythm works, and Mariana's writing is so rhythmic. It's a sort of calm, steady, as you were saying, like the book is full of wisdom, and the rhythm of wisdom is very steady. So that was part of it. By this point that the book is finally published, now we mostly just send each other cat pictures.
The best part of the process are cat pictures. No, it was a wonderful process, absolutely new for me. All the questions that Julia did were precise, and I must think again about what was already written. Yeah, and this part of, I really enjoyed this part when I asked her to read so I can hear and to be okay with the rhythm in every sentence, but Julia did it perfectly. I really enjoyed it, this process. And now I read the book and I think, okay, yeah, it's me, but at the same time, it's not me, it's also Julia, and I love it. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I've prepared a small Proust-like questionnaire for you. The first question is, if this book were a bird, what kind of bird would it be and why?
You're starting this one, Mariana.
Okay, I'm starting. So, well, I really don't know birds' names, but I'm sure that it could be a bird who first flies low and then high to see the landscape, and then came back near to the floor.
Okay. I also don't know enough about birds. I know the names of like 5 birds. Hopefully, as Adam Levy knows, I'm an aspiring bird watcher. I would like to do this more, but I have terrible eyesight. That's not true. Adam knows a lot about birds. I do not. But when you asked me the question, 2 birds came to mind, and I tried to sort of take steps back to see why those birds had come to mind. And the first was a specific bird I saw in Paraty in Brazil, which was a kingfisher. And this bird came to mind because it holds itself quite small. When you look at it, it's sort of hunched and its beak is down, but it actually is not a terribly small bird. And so it sort of, the expansiveness that you see later sort of made me think of the book. So this is like, again, reverse logic. Seeing why my subconscious took me there. And the other bird was a swallow. And that is also a very personal reason. Swallows in Portuguese are called andorinhas. And you see them a lot by the seaside, or at least in Brazil, I see them by the ocean. And they tend to get very agitated when there's a storm coming. And it made me think of the Cassandra, the Crystal Wolf essay and the Prescience. In my family, whenever, I mean, even if you see massive black clouds and you know it's going to rain because there are massive black heavy clouds, if the swallows are agitated, you don't point at the black clouds, you point at the agitated swallows as a sort of forewarning of the storm that's to come. And I think that also has to do with wisdom, a sort of inborn, natural born wisdom. So that's my reverse logic for the two birds that popped into my mind when you asked that question.
Beautiful, thank you.
I want to see the pictures of that birds one day, Julia, please.
I'll send it to you by WhatsApp after I send you a cat photo.
Okay.
So if you could travel right now to one of the places the book mentions, which would it be and why?
Well, definitely Berlin. Summer is starting, so it's time to go to a Biergarten and have a beer and walk next to the river and listen to music and eat doner kebab and that Berlin stuff.
My answer is really corny. I want to go to Mariana's apartment and have dinner with her and drink beer and meet her cat Sabina and her partner Laura.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I want to do that too.
Well, you should come when I time travel too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And final Proust question: what is home for you?
Anda tú primero.
Vale. Okay. Well, I'm working currently in a series of podcasts. So there are podcasts around the essays of the book. So I recorded the one about home like a couple weeks ago. So I asked many people this question about what's home. So I thought about it a lot and I was not really sure. But at this time, in this moment, home for me is, of course, this house where I live in the south of Mexico City with my cat and my wife and my stepson. But also home is a place where I can sleep deeply and recognize every sound before I go to bed.
Beautiful. And you, Julia?
I have a very open relationship with home, and that if I do travel somewhere and I'm staying at a hotel, I always say at the end of the night that I'm going home, because that's where I'm going to sleep and that's where my temporary residence is. That's so complicated for someone who hasn't spent more than 5 years in a single city, but home is often where my family is. And right now also my cats and my plants, where there's a sort of almost intangible familiarity, sort of a sense of belonging that you can't quite put your finger on. But I think I developed that sense of belonging very fast. So if I did go over to Mariana's house right now and she kept me there for 5 days, I might be like, okay, it's home now. I have a cat, I have a friend.
Not near anymore.
I've translated an essay about this space. I feel like we have a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to, do you mind, Jazmina, if I turn some of these questions on to you? Like what bird is this book? Where would you travel to in the book right this moment? And what is home?
I wasn't prepared for this, Julia. Okay, let me think. So I think this book would be a sensontle. this is like a bird that it's not very attractive on the outside that you see, and it's very modest, it's very like brown, but then it is a bird that can imitate like 4,000, that's the name, no? It means 4,000 voices. It can imitate many things. And so it has all of these voices, and it sings, it's one of the birds that sings most beautiful. So something like that, I would say. If I could travel right now to one of the places in the book, it would also be Berlin, I think, because German culture and its language is strangely close and alien to my family and to my history. My mother's husband is from Germany. I have a very dear uncle who lives in Germany with his wife. I have friends in Germany, and I don't understand anything about the German language. I tried to study it with my stepfather for like 1 or 2 months, and it was just too much. I mean, it's such a difficult language. But it feels like a place I should know, and I don't, and I would love to. And home for me, you reminded me, Julia, there's a poem, and I don't remember the author, but it's a woman, and she's from Jamaica, I think, or somewhere in the Caribbean. And she has maybe Jamaica. She has a poem where she says, "Wherever I hang my knickers, that's my home." So yeah, it's not my case today. I think wherever my son and my husband and my mother are is home for me. Yes.
Thank you.
How about now? Would you like to read a passage from the book?
Yes, of course. Okay, I'm going to read in Spanish and Julia then English. Okay, I'm going to read my Colombian edition. Okay. Okay. Aves migratorias. Todas las escuelas de vuelo en Canadá rechazaron al joven Bill Leishman. El entusiasmo es insuficiente cuando un campo de hierba y la pista de aterrizaje te parecen del mismo color. Si un gen recesivo ha viajado por generaciones hasta instalarse en tu cromosoma X y te ha vuelto incapaz de distinguir entre el verde y el rojo, no puedes ser bombero, ni pintor, ni electricista. Si no ves la diferencia entre la cáscara de una manzana fresca y otra demasiado madura, tampoco puedes volar aviones. Tendrás que mirarlos desde la ventana, como a los pájaros. Y justo así, a través de la ventana, mirando pájaros, el joven Bill observó su piel implume y supo que sentía envidia de las alas. Así que decidió construirse unas para enmendar su cuerpo imperfecto. Antes que él, los seres humanos habían aprendido a volar observando el movimiento de las aves. Su vuelo y el de los aviones se rigen por los mismos principios. Las alas son planos aerodinámicos que dependen de la fuerza del aire. Encima de ellas, la presión debe ser menor, mientras que debajo, mayor. Esa es la clave para sobreponerse a la gravedad. Una de las ventajas de crecer en el campo es que el patio trasero de cualquier casa se puede convertir en pista de práctica de vuelo. Diariamente, Bill subía una colina arrastrando la otra mitad de su cuerpo, una extensa superficie de tela con forma de delta que sujetaba su torso al llegar a la cima. Provisto de alas, corría cuesta abajo para que el golpe del viento lo levantara de la tierra. Cuando el despegue era exitoso, la sensación del suelo rozándole los pies era lo primero y lo último. Grácil, su cuerpo se elevaba sobre el techo de la casa donde había crecido, por encima de los árboles alineados y monocromáticos. Después, el inevitable descenso, cuando el peso de la carne redobla y las alas se vuelven una prótesis dolorosa, un remedio de sí mismas. Como los vuelos le parecían cada vez más cortos y estaba cansado de subir la colina una y otra vez con el ala delta a cuestas, Bill le añadió un motor. A finales de la década de los 70, Bill Leishman se convirtió en pionero del vuelo de aviones ultraligeros.
Bill Leishman was turned down by every aviation school in Canada. No amount of enthusiasm will help if a runway and a field of grass look the same color. If a recessive gene is passed down through generations and settles in your X chromosome so that you can't tell red from green, you won't be working as a firefighter, a painter, or an electrician. If you can't tell a fresh apple skin from one that's too ripe, you won't be allowed to pilot planes. You'll have to watch them through the window, like birds. Just like that, as he watched birds through the window, a young Bill Lishman looked down at his featherless skin and realized he envied their wings. So he decided to build himself a pair to amend his imperfect body. Before him, mankind had learned to fly by observing the movement of birds. The flight of birds and of planes is governed by the same principles. Wings are flat aerodynamic surfaces that rely on the force of air. The pressure above needs to be lesser and the pressure below greater. This is the key to defying gravity. One advantage of growing up in the countryside is that any backyard can be turned into your own practice runway. Bill used to climb a hill every day, dragging behind him the other half of his body, a broad, delta-shaped canvas surface that he strapped to his torso on reaching the summit. Fitted with wings, he'd dash downhill and a gust of wind would lift him from the earth. On a successful takeoff, the feeling of the ground brushing his feet was first and last. His body gracefully rose above the house where he'd grown up and above the row of monochrome trees. Then came the inevitable descent, when the body's weight doubles and the wings turn into painful prosthetics, cheap knockoffs. Because his flights felt shorter and shorter and he was tired of hauling his delta wing up the hill time and again, Bill added an engine. By the late 70s, Bill Lishman had become a pioneer of ultralight aviation.
Thank you so much. That was lovely. I think we have time for questions now. If you have any and you're around and you want to ask, we're here. So we have a note from Piers at Brookline, and it's that the great Grace Nichols is the author of the poem I quoted. So thank you. Yeah, she's great. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot I had the Q&A questions. Oh, okay, but I think we still don't have any here. So if you have any questions, if not, we can continue to chat over here for a little bit. Yeah. So meanwhile, I can ask you, what are you working on right now? What are your projects at this time?
Mariana?
Okay, so I'm in the last year, well, starting the last year of my PhD. So I'm working almost every day with my thesis. So that takes all my energy. Well, I'm working also, but not as much as I would like in another book, but not very slowly, you know.
Another book of essays.
Yeah, another book of essays. You know, I can't write narrative or poetry. I can't, just essays, just nonfiction. Yeah.
Great.
I'm working on a book that is very, very different to Mariana. It's a short novel by an author from the Canary Islands called Andrea Abreu. And it is written in extremely colloquial Spanish, very local Canarian Spanish. And it is narrated by a 10-year-old with quite a dirty mind who has a best friend called Isora, who is really foul-mouthed and has an extremely foul-mouthed grandmother. So it's very short, but it's taking me a long time because the voice is so difficult to constellate, to try to figure out. I've been watching a lot of TV with teenagers in it so that I can get some language. I think if we were in normal times, I might sit behind a bus behind a bunch of teenagers to also try to figure out how people speak. And after that, I'll be translating a book by a Brazilian author. And then there's more to come, but I can't think about it or it'll stress me out.
Okay.
Are you working on anything, Jazmina?
Yes, I have a book coming up in Spanish around September, I think, which is a novel called Punto de Cruz, cross stitch, I think would be the translation. Mm-hmm. And yes, right now trying to work, but it's promoting books has taken a lot of time for me right now, but trying to write. And I was going to say, Julia, that I read that book, and it must be like one of the most difficult books to translate in the world. It's amazing, but I really want to read your translation once it's done.
Thank you. Well, I have to finish it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, Julia showed me a part of a song, a translation of a song. Do you remember the song, Julia?
Yes, Aventura. It was Aventura's Obsesión. Does anyone know that song? It's the song that reminds me of being like 13 years old. And it's such a strange translation problem. So the two friends, they have a book of songs where they write down lyrics from songs by this band Aventura. They're obsessed with Aventura. But they write the lyrics in like 10-year-old broken speech. So I have to translate the lyrics into English, and then with some sense of rhythm, but then also using a bit of Leet speak and a bit of like 10-year-old language and misspellings. But it was fun also because I put on this song Obsesión and started dancing around in the morning as I translated.
Great. So we actually have a question for Mariana from Farah Abdesamad. And she asks, do you feel any nostalgia about home? I was struck when reading your book that Mexico is there, but not really there either. Any reflections on this?
Okay, well, when I was in Germany, of course, I felt nostalgia about Mexico, about my home, about the streets I know very well here, and had to fight with this sensation about being lost, right? About doing something simple like going to supermarket was at the first time something strange to me, and also accept this resignation that maybe you won't understand anything. It doesn't matter how long you stay there. And the first time I went to Germany, I supposed to know German, but when I came, I understood nothing. It took like a couple weeks to get used to what I was hearing. Yeah, but also, for example, buy a ticket for the bus, like a journey, like a big problem because it's not easy as I'm used to do that here. But at the same time, when I came back to Mexico, many things that I am really used to live, like all these noisy streets, were too much when I came back, right? It's like learn another habits, I think. And well, yes, Mexico is there because it's my reference. It's all that it's the place I know the best.
Another question from Martina Hall. She asks, what are your hopes for the book now that it has been translated into English? Can you imagine it being translated into German? And for Julia, what would you say was the biggest challenge of translating this specific book? The German translations you mentioned earlier or something else?
Okay. Well, the process of having a book is always really, I don't want to say fun, but it's like grateful, right? To see the photos of your book or having the opportunity to talk with somebody else about your work or all these questions. I really enjoy this process. The question from Martina was like, where is it?
Can you imagine it being translated into German?
why not? Well, but I can't imagine right now the process, but it would be also interesting, I think.
It would be great. And then Greg, we had the second part of the question for Julia.
Thinking back on it now, I actually found the first paragraph of every essay the hardest to translate, because Mariana really set the scene in each of them, and they're very lyrical and very descriptive. So like, could I read like an opening paragraph that I really like, and also that was really hard to translate to get it right? So this is the opening paragraph to Normandy, which is also one of my favorite essays, because it goes from the sort of significance of head shearing in the Second World War, and then to talking about witches, and then to a very personal experience involving Mariana's sister and her mother. But so the opening paragraph in English, so you have a sense, and this is something that Mariana does a lot through the book. The ships landed on the beaches of Normandy before dawn. Along 80 kilometers of coastline, amphibious vessels slid out of the water like sea monsters and shook themselves dry. Flinging off their damp bodies, thousands of men smeared with the same euphoria of war. Insatiable, the beach seemed to devour the troops. Aircraft helped feed the assault from the sky. One by one, the soldiers surrendered themselves to flight, to the allure of the fall. Their jellyfish silhouettes, ephemeral but perfect for slipping through the air, negotiated gravity until the feel of the sand returned to them the animal weight of their bodies. Like, it's just grammatically everything sort of, every clause leans on the other, and because English works differently to Spanish, it's really hard to get them to work in the same order. And yeah, they're so colorful and evocative. And so I felt that I really had to nail every beginning. So I spent a lot of time refining those bits.
We have a question from Greg Cantor. What writers and literary influences have had the most impact on this book?
Well, I have to say that I didn't write this book alone. This was like a collaborative work. I remember perfectly these 2 years when I wrote it, that we have a session, like a workshop, you said, Jazmina? Yeah, every week. And it was a big opportunity to read another person's, and they said what's working, what's not working, also suggest what to read. And I think that was absolutely important in the process of writing this book. And I remember very well that you recommended me, Jazmina, a writer, Natalia Ginsburg. Do you remember that? I have that book in my bookshelf. So I read an essay called in Spanish, Los Zapatos Rotos. And I remember that when I read that essay, I thought, well, this is what I want to do. This language seems to be quite simple, but is writing in every white space in the page. So I want to try this rhythm and this kind of power of the minimal thing in the page, yeah, but in opposition with the content. So I think a lot about that. And of course, also Krista Wolf is a writer that I feel quite close, because I read a lot when I was at university, and I was absolutely in wonder about the way she used tenses, yeah, like this past and present working and future, of course, at the same time in the same paragraph. So it's wonderful for me.
You recommended Krista Wolf to me, and I recently just read Medea.
Medea Stimmen, yeah.
Yeah, and it was amazing. I mean, so when I read this book, after so many years of the first readings, and the essay about Krista Wolf was just like amazing to me. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for Natalia Ginsburg.
Thank you.
I absolutely love this book.
We have one more question from Lisa St. James. I love how each of these essays feels distinct and whole, even though they overlap so much thematically. Was it ever difficult to decide where one essay ends and another begins?
Well, maybe I'm answering the same question all the time. It's about what's a home, what's to have a home, and all the questions around home, I think. And maybe it's just a different place to talk about that. As I said at the beginning of this conversation, I started this book when I come back from Germany. So all this experience of Fremda, as the like German people said, was too close to me. So it was like something that came to me, and I have to answer to myself to when I came back. So maybe it's the big question, but that's why all are quite close, right? When I see this book at a certain distance, I think that maybe the project was there, but I couldn't see that.
Thank you so much. So I think we're getting to the end of this talk, and it was such a pleasure. Really, thank you so much, Mariana and Julia.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so much, Julia, Jazmina, Pierce. Thank you, and also Ashley. Thank you, Julia.
And Pierce and Ashley.
Thank you all so much. This has been so thoughtful and warm, and I think I could listen to the three of you for hours. But thank you everyone for coming. Ashley just put the link to the book, Our Immense Gratitude to Transit, for bringing this to English language readers. It is beautiful. It is a beautiful object, in addition to being beautiful inside too. So thank you everyone. And I see some messages in the chat. So thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.